Thank you. Joining me now with more, Mark Thiessen, a Fox News contributor and an American Enterprise Institute fellow. And Mark, Marie Harf was mercilessly mocked on the internet today because people felt she was suggesting, if only we could get these guys into community college, and set them on the road toward gainful employment, we would have no more people who believe this. Let's just watch a little bit of the way ISIS views the world. This would be eradicated if only we could, community college is the way. Watch.
Allah is with his believers, and it is he who directs the RPG grenade, punishing the enemy with the hands of the mujahideen.
Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, when you say that we can't kill all the terrorists, nor should we try, you've pretty much gone off the deep end. I mean, look, it is absolutely true that we have to try and kill all the terrorists, and we also have to defeat their ideology by offering the alternative of human freedom, which President Bush did say repeatedly. But the problem is you have to do both of those things, and President Obama isn't doing either of those things very well. If you go back to and sometimes, by the way, the best way to defeat their ideology is through military action. In 2007, when we launched the surge, that was both a military and an ideological defeat for ISIS, which then went by al-Qaeda in Iraq. It was a military defeat because we drove them from their safe havens, but it was an ideological defeat because they had come in to rally the Sunni masses to drive America out, and instead the Sunni masses joined with America to drive al-Qaeda, now ISIS, out of Iraq. So that was an ideological rejection by the very people they claim to be the vanguard of. So that's how you defeat their ideology, is by rallying Arabs and Muslims against them to reject their ideology. And the way you do that, you have to defeat them militarily. That's what we're not doing today.
How much of the backlash against Marie Harf on this has to do with the fact that she works for an administration that refuses to identify the enemy as what we all know it is, which is radical Islam? So she's coming to this debate already hampered because the administration refuses to be clear in who the enemy is, and then when you hear people trying to downplay it, or at least that's how it's perceived, that she's trying to downplay the battle by saying this is all about getting them jobs, she was sort of set up to fail.
No, you're absolutely right. And look, George W. Bush could say a similar thing, but he was going out there and actually leading the surge to defeat ISIS. And so when he said we also need to bring the hope of freedom, it wasn't seen as a dodge from actually doing the hard work of it. And he also called it radical Islam. You cannot, this is the problem, is that right now Barack Obama is doing these things well. He's forcing our military to fight ISIS with one hand tied behind our back, fighting them from the air when every military commander has said you cannot defeat them without some boots on the ground. So they can't be, we're not defeating them militarily, we're just pinning them down a little bit. And then ideologically, he's a conscientious objector in the ideological struggle against Islamic extremism. He won't call it by name. You cannot defeat their ideology when you dismiss them as JV terrorists.
But here's what Eric Holder said today. This is like much ado about nothing, and it's really just a Fox News invented issue. Listen.
More time talking about what do you call it, as opposed to what do you do about it. I mean, really, if Fox didn't talk about this, they'd have nothing else to talk about.
So it's us.
Yeah, exactly. The problem's it's not me, it's you. That's the problem. Look, the fact is, they're not doing what's necessary to defeat these people. They're forcing our military to fight them with one hand tied behind their back.
But he doesn't think it's important to name the enemy as radical Islam. He doesn't think the naming of it is important.
It is important, but put it aside. Put that aside for a second. Saying that the threat, it pales compared to global warming. Saying that people who were targeted in a kosher deli weren't targeted because they were Jews, or refusing to say that the people beheaded in that video weren't targeted because they're Christians. They were Egyptian citizens. They are congenitally incapable of speaking the language that is necessary to defeat the terrorists in an ideological struggle.
The irony is that their own former DIA, director of the intelligence agency, went on Fox News Sunday just this past night. He's been sounding the alarm on this for a long time now, saying it is important to name it. It is, and here's why. Listen.
I think what the American public is looking for is they're looking for moral and intellectual courage and clarity, and not a sense of, and I just say as passivity or confusion. You can't defeat an enemy that you don't admit exists. And I think that we have to clearly define what the enemy is. That's number one.
Lieutenant General Flynn does think this is an issue, not a Fox issue, Mr. Holder. But the question is whether the White House will ever agree as they hold a summit about violent extremism.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just important to name them. If you can't name them, then you can't talk about their ideas, and you can't debate their ideas and explain why their ideas are repugnant. So this is the problem, is that you have to take the words of the enemy seriously. The Al-Qaeda has been very clear about its intentions. They have said that they're coming after us. They have said that they are going to create a caliphate that's going all the way from all the lands that the Muslims once occupied, from Middle East to Spain. They have a clear ideology and a clear objectives, and you cannot debate those objectives and show why they're bad if you won't even name the ideology. So that this is what the problem with their refusal to say this is.
Mark, good to see you.
Thanks, Megan.
Well, some of